The scent of pumpkin pie filled the air as I checked the temperature on my tablet app. 350 degrees. Perfect. The notification banner sliding across the top of the screen caught my eye. Congratulations. Your pending application, EV289 for neural interface therapy device, has been scheduled for final review. My heart skipped. After 3 years of work, my medical device was finally moving forward. I couldn't wait to tell my family at Thanksgiving dinner. That was the moment my cousin Greg walked into the kitchen, smirking like he always did when he knew something I didn't. "Hey, Olivia, I hear congratulations are in order," he said, leaning against the counter where I was rolling out pie dough. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual as I crimped the edges of the crust. Greg tapped his designer watch and grinned. "The patent office. I got the notification this morning, though I'm pretty sure they sent it to you too." I stopped, flour-covered hands frozen mid-crimp. "What notification?" "For the neural interface, of course. I filed it under fast track last month. Just got preliminary approval." The room tilted sideways. "You... what?" "That's my project. My research. My prototype." Greg shrugged, taking a slice of apple from the cutting board. "Well, technically now it's mine. With a few modifications, of course." He said it so casually, like he was discussing borrowing a sweater, not stealing 3 years of my life. "Modifications? You don't even understand how it works." My voice was rising now, drawing attention. From the living room where the rest of the family was watching football, Aunt Rachel appeared in the doorway, wineglass in hand. "What's all this shouting about? Olivia, the Hendersons next door will hear you." Greg filed a patent for my neural interface, the one I've been working on since grad school. Aunt Rachel sipped her wine, unimpressed. "Oh, that little headband thing for migraines. Greg mentioned he'd helped you refine it." "Helped me?" He saw it once when he visited my lab. I was nearly shouting now. Uncle Peter wandered in, followed by my mother. "What's going on?" Before I could answer, Greg smoothly cut in. "Olivia's upset about the neural interface patent." I tried explaining that with my connections at MedTech Ventures, we can actually bring it to market, something she couldn't do on her own. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. My mother sighed that familiar, disappointed sigh. "Olivia, Greg has the business experience you don't. He's already got investors lined up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, that makes it okay for him to steal my work?" Uncle Peter frowned. "It's not stealing if it helps the family. Greg's offering you 8% of any profits. That's generous for just an idea." "Just an idea?" My voice was dangerously quiet now. "I built a working prototype. I completed 3 rounds of preliminary testing. I have documented research going back 3 years. And it would have sat in your apartment for another 3 years," Greg said smoothly. "Be reasonable, Olivia. You're a research assistant. You don't have the connections or capital to develop this commercially." I looked around the kitchen at their faces, uncomfortable but unmoved. They'd already decided. Greg was the golden boy with his MBA and flashy job at a venture capital firm. I was just the science nerd who'd never quite lived up to expectations. "The patent office will reject it once I show them my documentation," I said. My mother's face hardened. "Olivia Catherine Bennett, don't you dare make trouble over this. Greg is generously offering you a percentage. Don't let your pride get in the way of what's best for everyone." I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me to believe in fairness and honesty. What's best for everyone? Or what's best for Greg? The timer on the oven beeped. No one moved. "I think you should apologize to your cousin," Aunt Rachel said finally. That was when something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally broke clean through. "I'm not apologizing," I said, untying my apron, "and I'm not letting this go." "Olivia," my mother's voice had that warning tone, The one that used to make me fall in line immediately. Not today. The next apology in this room will be coming. From all of you, I said, grabbing my purse from the counter. And trust me, it's going to be a big one. Hey everyone, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I drove home to my apartment in Boston with tears blurring the road in front of me. Not sad tears, angry ones. The kind that burn your eyes and clear your head at the same time. 3 years of research, countless nights hunched over circuit boards and code, testing neural response patterns, refining the interface that could help millions suffering from chronic neuropathic pain. All stolen with a smile by my own cousin, with my family's blessing. The neural interface was more than just a project. It had started after watching my college roommate Julie struggle with debilitating pain from a car accident. Existing therapies either didn't work or left her zombie-like from medications. I'd been researching neural pathways as part of my PhD work when the idea hit me. What if we could create a non-invasive way to reprogram how the brain processes certain pain signals? The prototype wasn't pretty, a headband with electrodes and a small control unit, but it worked. Julie could wear it for 30 minutes a day and get relief that lasted hours, sometimes an entire day. No drugs, no side effects, just targeted neural stimulation that helped her brain create new pathways around the damaged nerves. I'd shown it to Greg 6 months ago when he visited my lab at the university. He'd seemed impressed, asked a few questions, taken some photos to show his friends, and then never mentioned it again. I should have known better. Greg had been taking credit for other people's work since we were kids. In elementary school, he'd put his name on my science fair project when I got sick the day of judging. In high school, he'd somehow convinced everyone that he'd come up with our winning robotics design, when all he'd done was show up to the competition. Now he was doing it again, but the stakes were so much higher. Inside my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and went straight to my home office. Filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled meticulously by date. My laptop held digital copies of everything, but there was something comforting about the physical proof. Handwritten notes, diagrams, component orders, test results signed by volunteer participants. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Happy Thanksgiving, Brainiac," Julie answered on the second ring. "Shouldn't you be elbow-deep in turkey and family drama by now?" Greg stole my neural interface design. I didn't bother with preamble. Filed a patent for it. The silence on the other end stretched for 3 seconds. "That absolute waste of oxygen," Julie finally said, her voice low and deadly. "Please tell me you're not calling from prison after murdering him with a turkey baster." Despite everything, I laughed. This was why I loved Julie. No questions, no devil's advocate, just immediate, unequivocal support. Not yet, but the night is young. What are you going to do? I stared at my filing cabinets, at the prototype, sitting on my desk, at the framed photo of Julie and me at graduation, her leaning on a cane but smiling wider than anyone. "I'm going to fight," I said, and the certainty in my voice surprised even me. "I have all the documentation. The patent office will side with me once they see it." "What did your family say?" Julie knew my family well enough to ask this cautiously. "They sided with him, said I should be grateful for the 8% he's offering me." My voice cracked a little. "My own mother told me not to make trouble." Julie swore colorfully. "Okay, first of all, your family sucks. Second, you need a lawyer." "Nah, I can't afford a patent attorney, Jules. I'm a research assistant living on ramen and hope." "My brother Derek is a second-year associate at Bergman and Rice. They do intellectual property. Let me call him." "On Thanksgiving?" "Julie, no. On any damn day. This is theft, Liv. And it's not just about you. It's about all the people who could benefit from your device. People like me. I'm calling him right now. I'll text you when I hear back." After we hung up, I sat down at my computer and typed patent infringement into the search bar. 4 hours and 17 open browser tabs later, I had the beginnings of a plan. First, I needed to document everything. Again, but more thoroughly this time. I started scanning every page in my notebooks, every component receipt, every test result. I created a timeline showing the development process from initial concept to working prototype. I dug up emails I'd sent to professors discussing the project, text messages to Julie about breakthroughs, even Instagram posts where I'd vaguely mentioned working on something exciting, without details, of course. I wasn't stupid about intellectual property, unlike some cousins I could name. Most importantly, I had video logs. I'd recorded my work sessions partly for documentation and partly to track my thought process. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dozens of videos showing me building, testing, and refining the neural interface, all with timestamps that proved I'd been developing this long before Greg ever saw it. My phone pinged around 9 p.m., a text from Julie. Derek says meet him at his office tomorrow 10 a.m., bringing senior partner who owes him favor. Don't sign anything Greg or anyone sends you. Another ping. Also, he says bring all documentation, especially anything showing Greg had access to your work and when. I had exactly that. A visitor log from the university lab with Greg's signature, plus photos he'd taken that day, which he'd stupidly shared to our family group chat with the caption, "Visiting Einstein in her natural habitat." I wrote back, "Tell Derek I'll bring everything, and I'm buying you both Christmas presents until the end of time." Julie's response was immediate. "Just name your firstborn after me. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we go to war." But sleep didn't come. Easily. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my mother's kitchen. The casual way Greg had announced his theft. The automatic way my family had backed him. It wasn't just about the neural interface anymore. It was about a lifetime of being underestimated and overlooked. I'd always been the smart one in the family, which sounds like a compliment until you realize it's often code for not the successful one, or not the practical one, or not the one we brag about at parties. When I got my full scholarship to MIT, Aunt Rachel had said, "That's nice, dear, but when will you have time to meet someone and settle down?" When Greg got into a mid-tier business school with partial scholarship, they threw him a party. I remembered my graduation dinner, where Uncle Peter had asked about my job prospects with that concerned furrow in his brow. When I'd explained I was staying at the university as a research assistant while developing some ideas, he'd patted my hand and said, "Well, not everyone can be entrepreneurial like Greg." Greg, who had never had an original idea in his life. Greg, who was supposedly entrepreneurial because he worked at a firm that invested other people's money into other people's ideas. Greg, who now thought he could take the most important work I'd ever done and slap his name on it. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through my blinds and a renewed sense of purpose. I showered, pulled, on my most professional-looking outfit, black pants, blue blouse, and the blazer I'd bought for job interviews, and packed my documentation into my most organized filing box. Bergman and Rice occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The reception area screamed money, all glass, chrome, and what looked like original artwork. I gave my name to the receptionist, trying not to think about what an hour of this firm's time must cost. Julie's brother Derek appeared a few minutes later. We'd met a handful of times at Julie's place, but I barely recognized him in his tailored suit and designer glasses. He looked like he belonged in this building in a way I definitely didn't. "Olivia," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Come on back. Howard's waiting in the conference room." Howard turned out to be Howard Bergman himself, senior partner, gray-haired, with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of winning. He stood when I entered, his handshake surprisingly warm. "Derek tells me someone's trying to steal your invention," he said without preamble. Tell me everything, and don't leave anything out. For the next hour, I did exactly that. I walked them through the neural interface's development, how it worked, why it mattered. I showed them my documentation, the visitor log with Greg's signature, the photos he'd taken. I played a sampling of my video logs and explained the testing process. When I finished, Howard was silent for a long moment, tapping his pen against a legal pad covered in notes. In 30 years of practice, he finally said, I've seen a lot of patent disputes. Most are murky, two parties working on similar ideas, timelines that overlap, evidence that could go either way. He looked up at me. This isn't murky. This is one of the clearest cases of intellectual property theft I've ever seen. Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt lightheaded. So you can help me? We're going to do more than help you, Howard said, a gleam in his eye. We're going to make your cousin regret the day he ever set foot in your lab. I can't afford, I started. Howard waved a hand dismissively. Pro bono. The firm does a certain number of cases each year, and this one. He smiled. Let's just say I enjoy teaching lessons to people who think they can steal from those who actually create things. Derek grinned. Plus, Julie would kill me if I didn't help. She says your device is the only thing that's given her real relief in years. So what do we do? I asked. First, Howard said, we file an official dispute with the patent office, including all your documentation. That puts an immediate hold on Greg's application. He made a note on his pad. Then we send a cease and desist letter to Greg and any investors he's approached, warning them of potential legal consequences of proceeding with stolen intellectual property. Will that be enough? I asked. Howard's smile turned predatory. Not nearly. Next, we file for an emergency injunction preventing him from developing, discussing, or marketing the device in any way. After that, we prepare a civil suit for theft of intellectual property, with potential damages in the millions. Millions? I squeaked. Your device has significant commercial potential. The market for non-invasive pain management is enormous. Howard tapped his pen again. Which reminds me, we should file your own patent application immediately, with an expedited review request. Derek leaned forward. We'll also prepare documentation for the university's legal team. As a research assistant, they may have some claim to your work as well, but they'll be much more reasonable to deal with than your cousin. My head was spinning. This is a lot. Patent theft is a lot, Howard said simply. But you've done everything right, Olivia. You documented your work meticulously. Most inventors aren't nearly so careful. As I left the law firm with a plan in place and first steps already in motion, my phone buzzed with text from the family group chat. Mom, Olivia, please call me. We need to discuss this rationally. Aunt Rachel, your mother is very upset. This family disagreement shouldn't involve outsiders. Greg, just got an interesting call from my attorney. Seriously, Liv? Let's talk before this gets out of hand. I ignored them all and texted Julie instead. Your brother and his boss are literal superheroes. First steps in motion. Feel like I can breathe for the first time since yesterday. Julie's response came immediately. Yes. Thanksgiving may be over, but Greg's about to get served. Over the next few days, Howard and Derek moved with impressive speed. The patent dispute was filed, along with my own expedited application, the cease and desist. Letters went out not just to Greg, but to everyone at his firm and the two investors he'd already approached. The response was immediate and intense. Greg called 18 times in one day. When I didn't answer, he started texting. This isn't funny anymore, Olivia. Do you have any idea what you've done? My boss is furious. The investors are threatening to blacklist our entire firm. Pick up your phone. I forwarded each message to Derek without responding. Then came the family pressure campaign. Mom called daily, her voicemails evolving from irritated to tearful. Uncle Peter sent an email with the subject line, "Family Matters, should stay in the family," in all caps, explaining how I was hurting everyone with my stubbornness. Even my normally uninvolved father texted to say he was disappointed in how I was handling things. The most surprising response came from my younger sister Megan, who had always hero-worshipped Greg. She called on the 4th day. "Is it true?" she asked when I picked up, her voice unusually serious. "Did Greg really steal your invention?" "Yes," I said simply. "I have all the documentation to prove it." A long pause. "That's so messed up," she finally said. "And everyone's acting like you're the problem." I hadn't expected this. "You believe me?" "Of course I believe you," Megan said, sounding offended. "You're like pathologically honest. Remember when you returned to Target because they forgot to charge you for paper towels?" I laughed despite everything. I just didn't want to get arrested for stealing paper towels. "Exactly. You're a ridiculous rule follower. Greg, on the other hand," she trailed off. "He's always taken shortcuts. I just never thought he'd do something this low." "Thanks, Meg," I said, throat suddenly tight. "That means a lot." "Mom and Dad are being awful about this," she continued. "I tried defending you at dinner last night and they both shut me down. It's like they can't even consider that precious Greg might be in the wrong." "That sounds about right," I said, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. "Well, I think what you're doing is brave," Megan said firmly. "And when you win, this thing I want front row seats to watch Greg's face." After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand, feeling a strange mix of emotions. The hurt from my parents' betrayal was still raw, but knowing Megan was in my corner felt like finding unexpected shelter in a storm. The next day, Howard called, with news. "The patent office has acknowledged our dispute and evidence," he said. "Greg's application is officially on hold. More importantly, his firm has placed him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation." "Really?" I sat down hard on my couch. Firms like his live and die by their reputation. They can't afford to be associated with intellectual property theft. The senior partners are falling all over themselves to distance the company from Greg's actions. "What about the application I filed?" "Moving forward smoothly. With the evidence we submitted and the university's supportive statement, I expect approval within months rather than years." I took a deep breath. "What happens next?" "Now, we wait," Howard said. "But not for long. I've just received a very interesting invitation that came to the firm's address." "What invitation?" "Apparently, your family is hosting a Thanksgiving Redux dinner this weekend. The formal card says, 'To clear up recent misunderstandings and restore family harmony.'" "Your mother signed it," I groaned. "They do this every year, a second Thanksgiving the weekend after, usually for people who couldn't make it to the first one. I'm definitely not going." "Actually," Howard said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "I think you should. And I think Derek and I should accompany you." "You want to go to my family's Thanksgiving dinner?" I asked incredulously. "Consider it a professional recommendation. I have a strong suspicion this is an attempt to pressure you in person, possibly with some kind of settlement offer from Greg. It would be best if you had representation present." I considered this. The thought of facing my family made my stomach churn, but the idea of showing up with 2 attorneys from Bergman and Rice had a certain appeal. "Okay," I said slowly. "But fair warning, my Aunt Rachel's stuffing is a war crime." Howard chuckled. "I've eaten settlement negotiation sandwiches in plenty of conference rooms. I think I can handle questionable stuffing." 2 days later, I found myself pulling up to my parents' suburban home with Derek in the passenger seat and Howard following in his own car. I'd warned them both what to expect, but Derek still whistled when we got out. "Your family lives here?" Julie said your dad was a high school principal. I looked at the sprawling colonial with fresh eyes, the manicured lawn, the luxury cars in the circular driveway, the tasteful fall decorations that screamed professional decorator. He is. Mom's a real estate agent. They did well during the housing boom, and they like to show it. I didn't add that keeping up appearances had always been paramount in the Bennett household, which was exactly why they were so eager to sweep Greg's theft under the rug. Howard joined us at the front walk, looking completely at ease in a casual blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Remember," he said quietly, "you don't have to justify or defend yourself. The facts are on your side. We're just here to make sure everyone remembers that." I nodded, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell to my own childhood home. Mom answered, her perfect hostess smile faltering when she saw my companions. "Olivia, we said family only." Her voice had the tight quality it got when she was trying not to show anger in front of outsiders. "These are my attorneys, Mom, Howard Bergman and Derek Reyes. They're here as my guests and my legal representation." Mom's face went pale, but years of social training kicked in. She stepped back, smile rigidly in place. "How unexpected. Please, come in." The living room fell silent as we entered. Greg was notably absent, but everyone else was there. Dad, in his armchair, Uncle Peter and Aunt Rachel on the sofa, cousins scattered around on various chairs, and Megan perched on the piano bench in the corner. She caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. "Olivia has brought her legal team," Mom announced, voice strained. Howard smoothly extended his hand to my father. "Howard Bergman, sir. Thank you for including us in your family gathering. I've heard wonderful things about your Thanksgiving traditions." Dad shook his hand automatically, looking like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. Derek was already chatting with my cousin Amy, who was pretending not to be impressed by his expensive watch and perfect haircut. I stood in the center of the room, feeling strangely powerful. For once, I wasn't the awkward science nerd trying to fit into family conversations about real estate trends and golf handicaps. I was the wronged party with two imposing attorneys at my back. "Where's Greg?" I asked. Uncle Peter cleared his throat. "He's running a bit late. Traffic from the city." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Well, while we wait, perhaps Howard could tell everyone why we're here." Howard smiled his courtroom smile. "I'd be delighted." What followed was the most polite, devastating dismantling of a family's collective delusion I'd ever witnessed. In measured, reasonable tones, Howard laid out exactly what Greg had done, the overwhelming evidence against him, and the serious legal and professional consequences he now faced. "Bergman and Rice rarely takes on pro bono patent disputes," he concluded. "But occasionally we encounter a case so clear-cut, with an inventor so deserving of protection, that we make an exception. Olivia's neural interface device represents a significant medical breakthrough that could help millions suffering from chronic pain. The attempt to appropriate her work is not just legally actionable, but, frankly, morally reprehensible." The room was dead silent. Uncle Peter stared at his hands. Aunt Rachel looked like she might faint. Mom had that frozen smile that hadn't reached her eyes once. Dad finally spoke. "Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Greg wouldn't deliberately..." The front door opened, and Greg walked in, stopping short when he saw me standing between Howard and Derek. "What are they doing here?" he demanded, looking at my parents rather than me. "Waiting for you," I said calmly, "so we can all discuss your patent application for my neural interface." Greg's face flushed. "I told you I refined your basic concept into something marketable. That's not theft, it's development." "Actually," Derek said pleasantly, "the evidence strongly indicates otherwise. Your patent application contains technical specifications identical to Olivia's prototype, down to the component level." "You don't understand how business works," Greg snapped. "Ideas need development, connections, capital. What they need, Howard interrupted, is not to be stolen. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. We have your signed lab visitor log from the day you first saw the fully functional prototype. We have photos you yourself took and shared with timestamps. We have Olivia's complete development documentation, going back 3 years. He opened the folder and placed a document on the coffee table. We also have this, your recent termination letter from MedTech Ventures, citing ethical violations and potential legal liability. Greg went pale. How did you get that? It's now part of the public record in our civil suit, Howard said simply. Civil suit? Aunt Rachel gasped. Olivia, you're suing your own cousin? Actually, I said, finding my voice, I'm suing a patent thief who happens to be related to me. The family connection makes it worse, not better. Uncle Peter stood up, face red. This is going too far. We invited you here to work this out reasonably, as a family. I think we're well past that, Derek said, especially given the evidence that your family gathering was intended to pressure our client into dropping valid legal claims. Mom stepped forward, hands clasped tightly together. Olivia, please. Greg made a mistake. We can work this out without destroying his career. Greg destroyed his own career, I said quietly. He stole my work, tried to patent it as his own, and then expected me to thank him for it. And all of you backed him up. Because he's family, Mom cried. So am I said, and the simplicity of this truth hung in the air. But none of you stood up for me. No one had an answer to that. The doorbell rang, making everyone jump. Dad went to answer it, grateful for the distraction. He returned looking confused, followed by a stern-looking woman in a business suit. I'm looking for Olivia Bennett, she announced, scanning the room, until her eyes landed on me. I'm Dr. Eleanor Cruz, Director of the Patent Application Examination Division. I understand there's a dispute regarding application number EV 2089? Howard stepped forward smoothly. Dr. Cruz, this is unexpected. May I ask why you're personally addressing this matter? Dr. Cruz adjusted her glasses. The evidence submitted in this case was so extraordinarily clear that I wanted to address it personally. We take intellectual property protection very seriously, and this case represents one of the most blatant attempts at appropriation I've seen in my 15 years with the office. She turned to me. Ms. Bennett, I'm pleased to inform you that your own application has been moved to expedited status and is expected to receive preliminary approval within the week. My heart leapt. Really? Yes. And as for the fraudulent application? Dr. Cruz turned to Greg, her expression hardening. Mr. Mitchell, I'm here to personally inform you that your application has been rejected with prejudice. Furthermore, we've referred the matter to the Department of Justice for potential criminal charges related to perjury in federal filings. Greg swayed slightly. Criminal charges? You signed a federal document claiming to be the original inventor. That is a federal offense. Dr. Cruz's voice was implacable. Our office does not tolerate such actions. The room had gone completely still. In the silence, the sound of a fork dropping in the kitchen echoed like a gunshot. Dr. Cruz turned back to me with a much warmer expression. Ms. Bennett, I've reviewed your work on the neural interface. It's genuinely impressive. The potential applications for chronic pain management alone are significant, not to mention the possibilities for neurological rehabilitation. Thank you, I said, feeling a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. It's meant to help people like my friend who've had limited success with traditional treatments. The medical community will be very interested, she said. Once your patent is secure, I'd encourage you to publish your research. With a final nod to Howard and a withering glance at Greg, Dr. Cruz departed, leaving the room in stunned silence. It was Megan who spoke first, her voice ringing clearly from the piano bench. Well, she said, standing up and walking over to stand beside me. I believe dinner is supposed to be ready. Should we move to the dining room? I, for one, am suddenly feeling very thankful today. I caught her eye and felt a smile, the first real one in days, spreading across my face. Whatever happened next with the family, with the patent, with everything, I knew two things for certain. My work was safe, and I was done being underestimated. As we moved toward the dining room, Howard leaned close to whisper, "I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've never seen the director of patent examination make a house call. You must have seriously impressed someone." I thought about the neural interface sitting in my apartment, about Julie using it to manage her pain, about all the others who could benefit. I thought about the years of work, the late nights, the belief that what I was creating mattered. "It's a good invention," I said simply. "It deserves to exist in the world, and so do I." The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom curtains and the lingering sensation that something had changed. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, letting the events of the previous evening settle into reality. The shocked faces of my family. Greg's pallor when Dr. Cruz mentioned criminal charges. The strange, vindicating silence as we'd all sat down. To dinner afterward, the only sounds the clink of silverware and Megan's occasional supportive glances from across the table. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and found it flooded with notifications. There were the expected messages, Julie demanding a full play-by-play of the evening, Derek checking that I'd gotten home safely, Howard sending a formal follow-up email outlining our next steps. But there were other messages too, ones I hadn't anticipated. A text from my father. "We need to talk. Just you and me. Coffee at Gardner's at 10? An email from a neurology professor I'd worked with during my PhD. "Heard rumors about your neural interface patent. Very interested in potential clinical applications. Available to discuss collaboration?" And most surprisingly, a voicemail from my mother that consisted mostly of silence and then, just before hanging up, a quiet, "I'm sorry, Olivia." I sat up, suddenly wide awake. The apologies were beginning, just as I'd predicted in my mother's kitchen days ago. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear them yet. I texted Dad back first. "Can't do today. Patent paperwork to finish. Maybe next week." It wasn't entirely untrue. Howard had sent forms that needed my signature, details about the prototype that required clarification. But the truth was, I needed time to process everything before I could face my family again, even one-on-one. I replied to the professor next, setting up a meeting for the following week. Whatever happened with my family, my work was moving forward. The neural interface would become a reality, helping people like Julie and countless others. That clarity felt like stepping into sunlight after a long, dark winter. Julie called as I was making coffee. "So?" she demanded without preamble. "Did they grovel appropriately? Did Greg cry? Please tell me Greg cried." I laughed despite myself. Not quite tears, but he looked like he might throw up when the patent director mentioned criminal charges. "The patent director showed up in person? Shut up." Julie's voice rose an octave. "Derek texted me something about it but wouldn't give details because of client confidentiality or whatever." Spill everything. I sat at my kitchen counter and recounted the previous evening blow by blow. Dr. Cruz's unexpected arrival, my family's stunned silence, Megan's small act of solidarity. It felt good to relive it, to solidify the memory of the moment when everything shifted. "Your mom actually apologized?" Julie asked when I finished. "I mean, it was a pathetic excuse for an apology, but still. That's like cosmic realignment for Eleanor Bennett." "I know," I said, stirring my coffee absently. "I'm not sure what to do with it, to be honest." "You don't have to do anything with it yet," Julie said firmly. "You're allowed to take time to process. They've been dismissing your achievements for years. One dinner and a half-baked apology doesn't erase that." She was right, of course. The validation from the patent office, from Howard and Derek, even from Dr. Cruz herself, all of it felt wonderful. but it also highlighted how little validation I'd received from my own family over the years. That realization carried its own kind of pain. "What are you going to do about Greg?" Julie asked after a pause. I sighed. "Howard says the criminal investigation is out of my hands now. The civil suit for damages is still moving forward, but honestly, I'm not sure I care that much about the money. I just wanted my work recognized as mine." "And punishment," Julie added. "Let's not forget sweet, sweet punishment for that entitled jerk." I smiled. "That too." After we hung up, I spent the morning signing documents Howard had sent over and answering the patent office's follow-up questions. Around noon, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Olivia Bennett?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Serena Vargas from Medinova Therapeutics. I understand you're the inventor of a neural interface device for pain management." I sat up straighter. Medinova was one of the leading medical technology companies in the country. "Yes, that's correct. How did you hear about it?" "Dr. Eleanor Cruz is an old friend and sits on our scientific advisory board. She was quite impressed with your work and suggested we reach out immediately." My breath caught. "I see." "Ms. Bennett, to be blunt, we'd like to discuss potential development and licensing opportunities. Our VP of Research and Development has cleared his schedule next Tuesday. Would you be available to meet?" I glanced around my small apartment, at the prototype sitting on my desk, at the years of work represented in stacks of notebooks and folders. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd be available Tuesday." After arrangements were made and the call ended, I sat in stunned silence. This was moving faster than I'd imagined possible. Just a week ago, I'd been fighting to prove the device was even mine. Now a major company wanted to discuss bringing it to market. I dialed. Howard immediately. "I just got a call from Medinova Therapeutics," I said when he answered. "They want to meet about licensing the neural interface." "Ah," Howard said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I wondered when they might reach out. Eleanor and I had a fascinating conversation after she left your parents' house last night." "You know Dr. Cruz? Personally?" "Boston is a small town in certain circles," Howard said mildly. "And I may have mentioned that your device could benefit from the right commercial partner, one with an ethical approach and deep pockets for clinical trials." "You orchestrated this?" I asked, incredulous. "I merely facilitated an introduction. The interest in your work is entirely genuine and well-deserved." He paused. "However, I suggest you don't attend any meetings alone. Derek and I would be happy to accompany you, especially for initial negotiations." Relief washed over me. "I'd appreciate that very much." "Excellent. And Olivia, this is just the beginning. Once word gets out about your device, you'll likely have multiple companies interested. We should discuss your priorities, licensing, partnership, perhaps even launching your own startup." My own startup. The thought had never seriously occurred to me. I'd been so focused on creating the technology that I hadn't fully considered what would happen once it existed. "I need to think about that," I said honestly. "Of course. There's time. For now, let's prepare for Tuesday." After hanging up, I texted Julie. "You'll never guess who just called. Medinova wants to meet about the neural interface." Her response was immediate. "Shut up. That's huge. Also, does this mean you're going to be rich? Because I have some thoughts about how you should spend your first $1,000,000. I laughed out loud, the sound strange in my quiet apartment. Something that had been tightly coiled inside me for years, since long before Greg's theft, was finally beginning to unwind. Later that afternoon, my buzzer rang unexpectedly. When I checked the video intercom, I was surprised to see Megan standing in the lobby, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Hey," she said when I answered. "Can I come up?" A few minutes later, she was sitting on my sofa, taking in my apartment with curious eyes. We'd never been particularly close. 7 years age difference and vastly different interests had seen to that, and she'd never visited me here before. "Nice place," she said, though we both knew it was small and rather plain compared to our parents' house or her own trendy downtown condo. "Thanks," I said, handing her a cup of tea. "What? Brings you by?" Megan took a deep breath. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for not standing up for you sooner, for believing Greg's version of things without question." I sat down across from her. "You did stand up for me. Last night. That meant a lot." "Yeah, after the patent director showed up and it was obvious Greg was busted." She shook her head. "That's not exactly profile and courage material." "Still," I insisted, "you were the only one in the family who did." Megan looked down at her tea. "Things are really bad at home. Dad's furious. Not at Greg, weirdly, but at those lawyers you brought. Mom keeps bursting into tears at random moments. Uncle Peter is talking about family loyalty like he's a character in The Godfather." I couldn't help but laugh. That sounds about right. "Greg's a mess," she continued. "Apparently his firm isn't just firing him. They're demanding he repay his last 3 months of salary for breach of ethics or something. And 2 of his business school buddies called him out publicly on LinkedIn. It's getting ugly." "I didn't want it to go this far," I said truthfully. "I just wanted my work recognized as mine." Megan put down her cup. "Can I see it? The neural thing that caused all this drama?" I hesitated only briefly before retrieving the prototype from my desk. It didn't look impressive. A sleek headband with embedded electrodes and a small control unit that connected to a smartphone app, but seeing it through Megan's eyes reminded me of how remarkable it actually was. "This is it?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. "How does it work?" I gave her the simplified explanation, how the device mapped neural pathways involved in chronic pain, then used targeted electrical stimulation to help the brain create new pathways that bypassed damaged nerves or problematic signals. "And it really works? Without drugs or surgery?" "It's worked in all our preliminary testing," I said. "It's not a permanent cure, but most users report significant relief for hours after each session, with cumulative benefits over time. And unlike opioids, there's no risk of addiction or dependency." Megan looked at the device with new respect. "No wonder MediNova is interested. This could help millions of people." "That's the hope," I said quietly. "And Greg tried to steal it." Megan shook her head. "I knew he was ambitious, but I never thought he'd do something like this." We sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating how someone we'd grown up with could have made such a choice. "What happens now?" Megan asked finally. "With the family, I mean." I took back the prototype, setting it carefully on the coffee table. "I don't know. I'm not sure that's up to me anymore. Mom wants to pretend nothing happened," Megan said with a grimace. "Dad wants to have a family meeting to clear the air. Uncle Peter's been talking about how we should keep legal matters within the family, whatever that means. And what do you think?" Megan met my eyes directly. "I think they all owe you a massive apology, and I think they need to recognize that what Greg did wasn't just wrong. It was illegal, and their response wasn't just hurtful. It was complicit." I blinked, startled by her clarity. "When did you get so wise?" She shrugged, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "I've been watching this family operate for 24 years. You notice patterns when you're usually the youngest person in the room." After Megan left, I sat thinking about what she'd said. The family dynamics that had always seemed fixed and immutable were suddenly in flux. For the first time, I wasn't the one being asked to accommodate, to understand, to make allowances. It was disorienting but also oddly freeing. My phone chimed with a text from Howard. "Just received word. Your patent application has officially been approved on expedited review. Congratulations, inventor." I stared at the message, a complicated mix of emotions washing over me. Pride, vindication, relief, but also a strange sense of loss. The battle had consumed me so completely that its sudden resolution left me feeling almost hollow. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. I grabbed my keys and the neural interface prototype and headed for Julie's apartment across town. If anyone deserved to share this moment with me, it was her. Julie greeted me with a bone-crushing hug. "Patent approved!" she shouted as I stepped. "Sont? Derek texted me. You're officially a genius inventor now." Her enthusiasm was exactly what I needed. Her apartment was warm and lived in, walls covered with art, shelves overflowing with books, the air scented with whatever she was cooking. It felt like a home in a way my own apartment never quite managed. "I brought this," I said, holding up. "The prototype. Thought you might want to try the officially patented version." Julie's eyes lit up. "Yes. The last session helped for almost 2 full days." This was what mattered, I realized as I helped her position the headband correctly. Not the family drama, not even the corporate interest, but this. The device actually helping someone. Julie's chronic pain had been a life sentence before. Now she had hours, sometimes days of relief. "So what happens next?" Julie asked as the neural interface began its calibration sequence. "Medinova and all that fancy corporate stuff?" I settled beside her on the couch. "Meeting on Tuesday. Howard and Derek are coming with me." "Smart." She adjusted the headband slightly. "And what about your family? Any more groveling apologies?" "Dad wants to meet for coffee. Mom left a weird voicemail. Megan actually came to my apartment today. Progress, I guess?" Julie raised an eyebrow. "Though if it were me, I'd make them suffer a bit longer." "That's why I'm here instead of having coffee with Dad," I admitted. "I'm not ready to hear whatever justifications they've come up with." Julie nodded sagely. "You need time to process everything. Totally normal." The device beeped, indicating it had completed its mapping. Julie tapped the start button on the app, and I watched as her face slowly relaxed, the constant tension around her eyes easing as the neural interface did its work. "God, that feels good," she murmured after a few minutes. "It's like someone turned down the volume on all the noise." Watching her, I felt a sureness settle over me. Whatever happened with my family, with Medinova, with everything else, this was real. This mattered. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Olivia Bennett?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Dr. Harrison Way from Memorial Hospital's Pain Management Center. I understand you've developed a non-invasive neural interface for chronic pain?" I straightened up. "Yes, that's correct. I'd very much like to discuss potential clinical trials. We have patients who've exhausted conventional options who might be ideal candidates for experimental treatments." I glanced at Julie, who was watching me with curious eyes, the neural interface still working its magic on her pain receptors. "I'd be very interested in that conversation, Dr. Way," I said. "Can I call you back tomorrow to set something up? I'm in the middle of a treatment session right now." After taking his contact information and ending the call, I relayed the conversation to Julie. "Clinical trials," she said, impressed. "This is getting real, fast." "Too fast?" I wondered aloud. Julie shook her head. "Not for the people who need it. For them, it's not fast enough." She was right, of course. In the midst of all the family drama and corporate interest, I'd almost lost sight of the most important thing. The people who could benefit from the device. People suffering from chronic pain, often invisible to others. Their quality of life dramatically diminished by constant discomfort that medications could only partially address. The neural interface could change that. Not cure it. I was always careful not to overpromise, but improve it significantly. Give people back hours, days, pieces of themselves that pain had stolen. I need to call Howard again, I said, already reaching for my phone. If Memorial Hospital wants to run trials, we should coordinate with whoever we end up partnering with. For production, Julie grinned. Listen to you, all business savvy suddenly. A week ago, you were just a nerdy research assistant, and now you're talking about production partners and clinical trials. A week ago, Greg was trying to steal my work, and my family was telling me to be grateful for 8% of the profits. I pointed. Out. Julie's grin faded. Fair point. It's been a hell of a week. The longest week of my life, I agreed, and somehow also the fastest. After the neural interface session finished, Julie and I ordered takeout and spent the evening discussing the future. Not just the immediate future of meetings and patents and potential partnerships, but the broader future. What it might mean to have my invention in the world, helping people. What it might mean for my career, for my life. You could start your own company, Julie suggested, twirling noodles around her fork. Be the boss lady. Create more cool brain gadgets. Maybe, I said, considering the idea seriously for the first time. Though the development costs for medical devices are astronomical, I'd need serious investors. After Medinova and Memorial. Hospital? You'll have investors lined up around the block. It's all happening so fast, I said, voicing the thought that had been circling my mind all day. Last week I was just trying to finish the prototype refinements. Now it's patents and companies and clinical trials. And family drama, Julie added helpfully. Don't forget the epic family drama. I laughed. How could I? Though honestly, that part feels less important now. And it was true. While the betrayal still stung, it was increasingly overshadowed by the exciting possibilities opening up around my work. The neural interface was being recognized for what it was, an important innovation with real potential to help people, and that recognition was coming from the people who mattered most in the field. Do you think you'll forgive them? Julie asked, her tone more serious now. Your family, I mean. I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe eventually, at least some of them. Megan, definitely. And Greg? I shook my head. That's harder to imagine. What he did wasn't just hurtful, it was calculated. He saw something valuable I had created and decided to take it, knowing exactly what he was doing. Total sociopath move, Julie agreed. The weird thing is, if he'd just asked, I probably would have collaborated with him, I admitted. His business background and my technical expertise could have been complementary. We could have been partners. But he didn't want a partner, Julie pointed out. He wanted all the credit and most of the profit. Exactly, I sighed. And that's the part I'm not sure I can forgive. Not the attempt to steal my work, but the fundamental assumption that I didn't deserve full credit for it. Julie reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Well, now everyone knows exactly what you deserve, and they're falling all over themselves to give it to you. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. When I checked it, I nearly dropped the phone. What? Julie demanded, seeing my expression. What happened? It's from Stanford Medical Center, I said, scanning the message. They want to discuss incorporating the neural interface into their advanced pain management protocols. They're offering to fly me out to California next month. Julie's eyes widened. Stanford? As in one of the top medical research facilities in the country? I nodded, still staring at the email. Apparently, Dr. Cruz has been busy making introductions. This is insane, Julie said, shaking her head in amazement. In a good way, but still. Insane. I set the phone down, trying to process this latest development. A week ago, I was fighting to prove the device was even mine. Now Stanford wants to implement it in their protocols. Because it works, Julie said simply. Because you created something that actually helps people. And now the right people are finding out about it. Later that night, as I drove home from Julie's apartment, I thought about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. The betrayal and the vindication, the family fractures and the professional opportunities. The past 7 days had completely upended my life in ways I was still struggling to comprehend. As I waited at a red light, my phone rang through the car's speakers. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Olivia? It's Greg." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you want?" He exhaled heavily into the phone. I need to talk to you. In person." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," he said, and something in his voice, a raw desperation I'd never heard from confident, polished Greg, gave me pause. "Just hear me out. Coffee, public place, wherever you want. I just need to talk to you." The light turned green. I drove through the intersection in silence, considering. "Why should I?" I finally asked. "Give me one good reason." "Because," Greg said quietly, "I owe you an explanation. Not an excuse, an explanation. And then, if you want, you never have to speak to me again." I thought about all the questions I still had. Why he'd done it. Whether he'd ever considered the consequences. What he'd thought would happen. "Fine," I said as I turned onto my street. "Boston Public Library, Courtyard Cafe, tomorrow at 2, 30 minutes, that's all you get." "Thank you," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. "I'll be there." I ended the call and sat in my car for a long moment after parking, wondering if I'd made the right decision. Part of me had no interest in hearing anything Greg had to say. Another part needed closure, needed to understand how someone I'd grown up with could betray me so completely. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I realized something surprising. I wasn't afraid of the conversation. A week ago, the thought of confronting Greg would have filled me with anxiety. Now, with my patent approved, with Medinova and Memorial, Hospital and Stanford all validating my work, I felt secure in a way I never had before. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was worth. And no one, not Greg, not my family, not anyone, could take that knowledge away from me. I unlocked my apartment door, feeling strangely at peace despite the uncertainty ahead. Whatever Greg had to say tomorrow, whatever decisions awaited me with Medinova on Tuesday, whatever reconciliation might or might not be possible with my family, I would face it all from a position of strength I hadn't known I possessed until I was forced to fight. Sometimes I realized as I stepped inside, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have left. The Boston Public Library courtyard was surprisingly busy for a weekday afternoon. Students huddled over laptops. Tourists snapped photos of the architecture, and business people conducted quiet meetings over expensive coffee. I arrived 15 minutes early, deliberately choosing a table with clear sightlines to both exits. Old habits from childhood always have an escape route when dealing with Greg. I ordered a cappuccino I didn't particularly want, just to have something to do with my hands. The November air had a bite to it, but the courtyard's heat lamps kept the space comfortably warm. I watched the entrance, wondering if Greg would actually show up, or if this was some kind of power play. With Greg, you never knew. He arrived 5 minutes early, scanning the courtyard until his eyes landed on me. I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the designer suit and the confident swagger. Instead, he wore jeans and a rumpled button-down, his hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. "Olivia," he said as he approached, voice uncertain. "Thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "You have 30 minutes. He sat down, hands clasped tightly on the table. For a moment, he just stared at them, as if gathering courage. "I know nothing I say will make this right," he began. "But I need you to understand why I did it. Not to excuse it, there is no excuse, but so you can. I don't know. Have the full picture, I guess." I took a sip of my cappuccino, waiting. Greg exhaled slowly. When I visited your lab that day, I was in trouble. Big trouble. I'd promised my firm I could bring in MedTech Ventures, claimed I had connections in the field. I didn't. My performance review was coming up, and I had nothing to show. So you decided to steal my work, I said flatly. He winced. It sounds awful when you say it like that, but yes. When I saw your device, how well it worked, all I could think was that this could save my career. I took those photos thinking, maybe I could connect you with my firm, pitch it as a favor to my cousin. What changed? My boss, Martin. When I casually mentioned I knew someone working on a neural interface for pain management, he got really excited. Started talking about market potential, investment rounds, asked if the inventor would be open to letting our firm handle everything. Greg's hands twisted together nervously. I said I'd check. I was planning to call you, honestly. But then Martin asked to see what I had so far. Without thinking, I showed him the photos. He was blown away, started talking about patents immediately, and I just didn't correct him when he assumed it was my project. You let him believe you created it, I said, the familiar anger stirring again. Yes. Greg looked up, meeting. My eyes for the first time. It was a split-second decision that snowballed. Martin told the partners. They fast-tracked everything. Before I knew what was happening, they'd filed the patent application and were setting up meetings with investors. And at no point did you think, hey, maybe I should tell my cousin what I'm doing with her life's work. He flushed. I told myself I'd bring you in once everything was set up, that I'd surprise you with this amazing deal, already negotiated. You'd be angry at first, but then grateful when you saw the opportunity. Grateful, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. For having my work stolen. I know how it sounds, Greg said miserably. I convinced myself it wasn't really stealing, that I was just fast-tracking the commercialization process, that you'd be better off with our firm handling the business, sighed while you focused on the science. That wasn't your decision to make. I know that now. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Everything moved so fast. By the time I realized how wrong it was, I was in too deep. The preliminary patent was filed. Investor meetings were scheduled. My bonus was already processed. I leaned forward. So, what exactly changed? Because a week ago at Thanksgiving, you were still pretending it was your invention, still expecting me to accept your table scraps and say thank you. Greg's face crumpled slightly. Nothing changed. That's the worst part. I was still trying to justify it to myself, to convince everyone, including you, that what I'd done was somehow okay. It took the patent director showing up at Thanksgiving dinner and threatening criminal charges for me to finally face what I'd done. He fell silent, staring at his hands again. What happens now? I asked after a moment. With your job? With the criminal investigation? I'm done at MedTech Ventures, officially terminated for ethical violations. They're demanding I repay my last 3 months of salary and bonus. He gave a hollow laugh. I don't have it. I spent most of it on the down payment for a condo. And the criminal charges? My lawyer says I'll probably avoid jail time since I didn't profit substantially from the fraud yet, and since the patent wasn't fully approved in my name. But there will be fines. Probably professional sanctions. He looked up again. I'll never work in venture capital again. My reputation in the industry is destroyed. I should have felt vindicated, even pleased. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger still, yes, but also a strange emptiness where satisfaction should have been. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. What do you want from me? Nothing, Greg said quickly. I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not help, nothing. I just thought you deserved to hear it from me directly. Why I did it. What I was thinking. He paused. And to tell you I'm sorry. Not because it changes anything, but because you deserve to hear it. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. Greg had always been charming when he needed to be. It was part of what made him successful and dangerous. The neural interface, I said finally. Did you ever actually care about what it does? About the people it could help? Something flickered in his eyes. At first, no. It was just a potential career save. He hesitated. But after that day in your lab, I kept thinking about your friend Julie. How you said it gave her pain-free. Hours for the first time in years. I started reading about chronic pain patients, what their lives are like. He shook his head slightly. It sounds self-serving to say this now, but somewhere along the way, I did start to care about getting the device to market. Not for the right reasons initially, but eventually because I realized how many people it could help. Oddly, this rang true. Greg had always been complex, capable of both calculated selfishness and genuine empathy, sometimes simultaneously. Medinova is interested in licensing the technology, I said, watching his reaction carefully. So are Memorial Hospital and Stanford Medical Center. His eyes widened. Already? That's incredible, Liv. The device could be helping patients within months instead of years. The genuine excitement in his voice caught me off guard. Despite everything, he did seem to care about the device's potential impact. Yes, I agreed. Though there's still a long road of clinical trials and regulatory approvals ahead. Greg nodded. Medinova has an excellent track record with FDA fast-tracking, and their distribution network is global. He caught himself and flushed. Sorry, not my business anymore. No, it's not, I agreed, but without the edge that would have been in my voice a week ago. We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the courtyard filling the space between us, espresso machines hissing, quiet conversations, the occasional burst of laughter. I should go, Greg said finally, glancing at his watch. You're 30? Minutes are almost up. One more question, I said as he started to rise. The family. Where do they stand now? Greg sank back into his chair. Divided. Uncle Peter and Aunt Rachel are still defending me, saying the consequences are too severe for a mistake of judgment. Your mom is torn between defending me and being horrified at what I did. Your dad. He hesitated. What about my dad? He's furious with me, Greg admitted. Called me personally to tell me I'd disgraced the family and myself. Said some things I probably deserved to hear. This surprised me. Dad had always favored Greg, had always seen in him the son he'd never had. Since when does Dad take my side? Since Dr. Cruz explained exactly what the neural interface does, apparently. Greg shrugged. Did you know his sister, your Aunt Catherine, has suffered from neuropathic pain since her car accident? The one they never talk about? I stared at him. No, I didn't know that. Neither did I, until he mentioned it during his lecture on my moral failings. Said your device could have helped her if it had been available 15 years ago. This revelation hit me harder than I'd expected. Aunt Catherine had always been a peripheral figure in family gatherings, quiet, often leaving early. I'd never known why. So Dad's support is conditional on my invention potentially helping. His sister, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Greg looked thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe seeing its potential made him finally recognize the value of what you've been doing all these years. He stood up. For what it's worth, Megan's firmly in your corner, has been telling anyone who'll listen how brilliant her sister is. Despite everything, that made me smile. Megan's a good kid. She is. Greg hesitated, then extended his hand. Thank you for listening, Olivia. I know I don't deserve even that much. I looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment before finally taking it briefly. Goodbye, Greg. As I watched him walk away, shoulders slumped, I realized I felt no triumph in his downfall, no pleasure in his suffering. Just a quiet certainty that justice had been served, however painfully. My phone buzzed with a text from Howard. Medinova called. They want to move the meeting up to tomorrow. Can you make it? Derek and I have adjusted our schedules. I texted back quickly. Yes, I can be there. Thank you. The universe wasn't wasting any time moving forward, and neither would I. The Medinova offices occupied half a floor in a sleek downtown building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the reception area featured awards in glass cases and framed articles about the company's medical innovations. I felt distinctly out of place in my simple black pantsuit, the most professional outfit I owned, clutching my prototype in its protective case. Howard and Derek met me in the lobby, both impeccably dressed in suits that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Their presence was immediately reassuring. Nervous? Derek asked as we rode the elevator up. Terrified, I admitted. I've never done anything like this before. You'll be fine, Howard assured me. Just remember, they need your innovation more than you need them. That gives you leverage. The meeting room contained more people than I'd expected. 6 executives from various departments, all watching with interest as I set up the neural interface demonstration. Howard had advised me to show the device in action rather than just talking about it. My colleague Julie has agreed to demonstrate how the device works, I explained, connecting to a video call where Julie waited in her apartment, neural interface headband already in position. Julie suffers from chronic neuropathic pain resulting from a car accident 7 years ago. She's tried numerous treatments with limited success. I nodded to Julie, who began explaining her experience with the device, the immediate relief, the extended benefits, the lack of side effects compared to medications. The executives leaned forward, their interest palpable. When Julie finished her testimony, the room erupted in questions about mechanism of action, about testing protocols, about manufacturing specifications. I answered each one clearly, Howard occasionally stepping in when the questions veered into business territory. The preliminary data is extremely promising, said Dr. Eliza Merritt, Medinova's chief medical officer. But we'd need extensive clinical trials before commercialization. Of course, I agreed. I've already been contacted by Memorial Hospital and Stanford Medical Center about potential trial partnerships. This caused a stir around the table with significant glances exchanged. Victor Chen, the CEO, spoke for the first time. Ms. Bennett, we're prepared to offer an exclusive licensing agreement with an initial payment of $5 million, plus royalties on all future sales. I managed not to visibly react to the number, though my heart rate doubled. Howard had prepared me for this moment, had told me not to accept the first offer no matter how good it sounded. That's an interesting starting point, Howard said smoothly. But given the revolutionary nature of Ms. Bennett's technology and the significant market potential, we believe the initial payment should be closer to $15 million, with guaranteed minimum royalties regardless of sales performance. I expected pushback, but what followed was a surprisingly collegial negotiation. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, we had agreed on an $8 million initial payment, escalating royalties based on sales thresholds, and, most importantly to me, a commitment to prioritize clinical trials and accessibility programs for underserved populations. One more thing, I said as the meeting was wrapping up. I want to remain involved in the clinical development process. This isn't just a business transaction for me. I built this device to help people like Julie, and I want to ensure it reaches them as intended. Dr. Merritt nodded approvingly. We would welcome your continued involvement. In fact, we'd like to offer you a consulting position during the development phase, with potential for a more permanent role if you're interested. As we rode the elevator back down, I felt slightly dizzy with the reality of what had just happened. $8 million, I murmured. Is this really happening? Howard smiled. It's really happening, and it's well-deserved. What do I do now? I asked, suddenly overwhelmed by the implications. First, we finalize the contract, Derek said practically. Then you should probably talk to a financial advisor. Beyond that, he shrugged. It's up to you. The consulting role is worth considering, Howard added as we exited the building. It would keep you involved while allowing you to pursue other research if you wish. Other research. The thought hadn't even occurred to me yet. With financial, security, and professional validation, I could potentially develop more medical devices, explore other applications for neural interface technology. The possibilities seemed suddenly endless. I need to call Julie, I said, still processing. And I should probably talk to my family at some point. All in good time, Howard said, checking his watch. For now, I suggest celebrating this milestone. Derek and I would be honored to take you to dinner. The restaurant Howard chose was the kind of place I'd never have entered on my own. All soft lighting, crisp white tablecloths, and waitstaff who moved like ghosts. We toasted with champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. To innovation, Howard said, raising his glass. To justice, Derek added with a grin. To new beginnings, I said, thinking of all that had happened and all that was still to come. As we dined, Howard shared stories of other inventors he'd represented, other David and Goliath battles he'd fought. I realized that while my situation with Greg was personal, the larger dynamics at play, power imbalances, intellectual property theft, the struggle for proper recognition, were unfortunately common. The difference in your case, Howard noted, was the impeccable documentation. Most inventors aren't nearly so thorough. I've always been methodical, I said. It's just how my mind works. It saved your invention, Derek pointed out, and quite possibly your cousin from more serious criminal charges. I hadn't thought of it that way before. My meticulous nature, often dismissed by family as obsessive or unnecessarily cautious, had protected not only my work, but, ironically, limited the damage to Greg as well. After dinner, as Howard's driver took me home, I found myself thinking about my conversation with Greg earlier. Despite everything, there had been a certain relief in hearing his explanation. Not because it excused anything, but because it made sense of the seemingly nonsensical. The betrayal still hurt, but understanding. Its origins somehow made it more comprehensible, less personally wounding. At home, I called Julie immediately, too excited to wait until morning. $8 million? She shrieked when I told her. Olivia, do you realize what this means? You're rich. Like, actually rich. It hasn't sunk in yet, I admitted. And there's still paperwork to finalize. Forget paperwork, Julie said dismissively. What are you going to do first? Buy a house? Travel the world? Tell your family to kiss your millionaire behind? I laughed. I honestly haven't thought that far ahead. Right now, I just want to make sure the device gets to the people who need it. Always the humanitarian, Julie said, but I could hear the affection in her voice. Seriously though, Liv, I'm so proud of you. Not just for the money, but for standing up for yourself. For not letting them take what was yours. I met with Greg today, I said suddenly, before the Medinova meeting. What? Why didn't you tell me? What did that snake want? I recounted our conversation, trying to capture both Greg's explanation and my own complicated feelings about it. Do you forgive him? Julie asked when I'd finished. No, I said after a moment's consideration. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I understand better now, and that's something. Understanding doesn't mean you have to let him back into your life, Julie said firmly. I know. I don't think that's possible anyway, at least not anytime soon. Too much damage has been done. I sighed. But the family is another matter. Megan, definitely. Mom and Dad. Maybe, eventually. There's something Greg told me about Dad's sister that I'm still processing. After filling Julie in on the revelation about Aunt Catherine, I fell silent, thinking. That explains a lot, Julie said thoughtfully. About your dad's sudden change of heart. Yes and no, I replied. It explains why the neural interface suddenly matters to him, but it doesn't address the deeper issue, that he never valued my work until he saw how it might benefit someone he cares about. People are complicated, Julie said with unusual gentleness. They can be simultaneously selfish and capable of growth. The question is whether you want to give him the chance to show he's changed. I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to just move forward with my life. Medinova, the consulting role, maybe even new research. Another part feels like I can't fully move on without some kind of resolution with my family. You don't have to decide tonight, Julie reminded me. You've had a pretty momentous day already. After we hung up, I sat on my sofa looking around my small apartment. For 3 years, this space had been both home and laboratory. The kitchen, table where I'd soldered countless circuit boards. The living room floor where I'd spread out diagrams when I ran out of desk space. The closet shelves stacked with components and testing equipment instead of extra towels or seasonal decorations. In a matter of weeks, perhaps days, I could afford any apartment in the city, any house in the suburbs. I could furnish a proper lab instead of working from my kitchen table. I could hire assistants, fund my own research, build something larger than a single device. The possibilities were dizzying. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Mom just told me about Medinova. OMG, Liv. Who told her? I smiled, typing back. News travels fast. Howard probably called Dad to update. Him. Megan. Are you going to take it? Please say yes. Me. Already accepted initial terms. Contract being finalized. Megan. My sister, the millionaire. When do we celebrate? The simple enthusiasm in her messages warmed me. Whatever happened with the rest of the family, Megan and I would be okay. Me. Soon. Need to process everything first. Megan. Fair. Enough. But when you're ready, I'm taking you shopping. Your professional wardrobe needs serious help if you're going to be a fancy medical device consultant. I laughed out loud, then sobered as another text came through. This one from my father. Dad, your mother and I are very proud of you. Would very much like to see you when you have time. I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. The words were right, but 3 decades of experience made me wary. Was he proud of my achievement? Or the monetary value now attached to it? Did he want to see me to mend our relationship? Or to associate himself with my success now that it was publicly validated? Before I could decide, another text arrived. This one from Dr. Eleanor Cruz at the patent office. Dr. Cruz. Ms. Bennett, I've been following developments with your neural interface with great interest. If you have time in the coming weeks, I'd value the opportunity to discuss your experience with the patent process and potential improvements to our protections for individual inventors. This was unexpected. I typed back, I'd be happy to meet. This week is quite full, but perhaps next? Her response came quickly. Excellent. My office will contact you to arrange details. Congratulations on your agreement with Medinova, a fine company with a strong ethical foundation. I wondered how she knew about Medinova already, then remembered Howard mentioning that Boston is a small town in certain circles. Apparently, the medical technology world was even smaller. As I prepared for bed that night, my mind kept returning to the conversation with Greg, to Dad's text, to the strange new reality I was stepping into. $8 million would change my life in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. But money wasn't what had set me free. Standing up for myself had done that long before the Medinova offer materialized. For years, I'd defined myself at least, partly through my family's eyes, the smart but impractical one, The one whose achievements were technically impressive but not real-world valuable. The one who needed guidance from the more business-savvy members of the clan. Now I saw how limiting that view had been, how it had constrained not just how they saw me, but how I saw myself. I fell asleep that night with a strange sense of peace. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, finalizing contracts, navigating, family dynamics, determining my new path forward, I would face them as a woman who knew her own worth. Not because others had finally recognized it, but because I had claimed it for myself. And that, more than patents or millions or professional validation, was the real victory. The MediNova contract sat on my coffee table, all 47 pages of it, the signature line awaiting my final approval. Howard had gone through every clause, every condition, every detail with meticulous care. The terms were even better than our initial agreement. $8 million upfront, royalties starting at 7% and escalating based on sales targets, guaranteed involvement in the clinical development process, and most importantly to me, an accessibility program to ensure the neural interface would reach patients regardless of their insurance status. I picked up the pen, hesitated for just a moment, then signed my name. Olivia Catherine Bennett, inventor, patent holder, and now, officially, a millionaire. The reality of it still hadn't fully sunk in. When I'd called my bank that morning to arrange for the transfer, the account manager had initially thought I was joking. $8 million didn't seem like a real number that could belong to me. My phone rang. Howard's office. "The courier just delivered the signed contract," his assistant informed me. "Mr. Bergman says congratulations, and the funds should be transferred within 48 hours. "Thank you," I said, still feeling slightly dazed. "Please tell Howard I appreciate everything." After hanging up, I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon. People walking dogs, cars searching for parking, a delivery person navigating a stack of packages. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, last week, last month. But everything had changed. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Julie. "Well?" she demanded the moment her face appeared on screen. "Did you sign?" I nodded, unable to suppress a smile. "Just now. Funds transfer in 48 hours. Julie let out a whoop so loud I had to lower my volume. "It's official. You're rich. I'm having celebratory pancakes for lunch in your honor." I laughed. "Pancakes? That's your idea of a celebration?" "Hey, not all of us are millionaires who can pop champagne on a Tuesday afternoon." She grinned. "Besides, I've been craving them all morning. The neural interface session yesterday went so well I actually slept through the night. No pain wake-ups." This news meant more to me than the contract. "Really? That's the longest continuous relief you've had." "I know. Dr. Patel actually asked what was different when I saw him this morning. When I told him about the neural interface trials, he wanted all the details." Julie pointed her fork at the camera. "You're going to have doctors beating down your door once word gets out." "MediNova will handle that part," I said, grateful now for the corporate partnership. "The clinical trials should start within months instead of years." "Speaking of which, did you decide about their consulting offer?" I nodded. 3 days a week, starting next month. Pretty flexible schedule, excellent compensation, and I get to oversee how the interface is developed and implemented." "Perfect." Julie took a bite of her pancakes. "So what's next on the agenda? House hunting? Sports car shopping? Private island browsing?" I rolled my eyes. "None of the above. I'm having dinner with my parents tonight." Julie stopped mid-chew. "Seriously? After everything?" "Megan set it up. Just the 4 of us at Itwizi, their house." I sighed. I'm not thrilled about it, but Megan made a good point. We have to start somewhere if we're ever going to repair things. "Just don't let them make you feel small," Julie said fiercely. "You're Dr. Olivia Bennett. neural interface inventor and millionaire. Remember that when your mom starts in about your haircut or whatever. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon answering emails. From Stanford Medical Center about my upcoming visit, from Memorial Hospital about potential collaboration, from Dr. Cruz about our meeting next week. It felt surreal to be corresponding with people and institutions I'd previously only read about in medical journals. Around 4, I received an unexpected message from the Dean of Research at my university. Dr. Bennett, I've just learned of your technology licensing agreement with Medinova. Congratulations on this remarkable achievement. The university would be interested in discussing faculty positions that would allow you to continue your groundbreaking work with our full institutional support. Please contact my office at your convenience to explore options. I read it twice, hardly believing what I was seeing. For years, I'd worked as a research assistant, constantly applying for grants, fighting for lab time, existing on the periphery of academia. Now they were approaching me, offering positions, institutional support. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 6 o'clock, I pulled into my parents' driveway, deliberately leaving my car directly behind Greg's usual parking spot. A small, petty reminder that things had changed. The house looked exactly as it always had. Pristine landscaping, tasteful, exterior lighting. The wreath on the door changed seasonally. Tonight it featured autumn leaves and miniature pumpkins. Megan opened the door before I could ring the bell, enveloping me in a tight hug. "You came," she whispered. "Thank you." "I'm not staying if it gets ugly," I warned quietly. "It won't. They're on their best behavior. Mom made your favorite lasagna and everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Trying to buy my forgiveness with pasta?" "Whatever works." Megan linked her arm through mine. "Come on, they're waiting in the dining room." Mom and Dad stood as we entered, both looking uncharacteristically nervous. Mom had clearly put effort into her appearance. Hair freshly styled, makeup perfect, wearing the blue dress she reserved for special occasions. Dad looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his posture less commanding. "Olivia," Mom said, voice wavering slightly. "You look lovely." "Thanks," I said, accepting her brief, awkward hug. "The house looks the same." "Some things don't change," Dad said, then winced at his own words. "But other things do, of course. People especially." He extended his hand, then shifted to a hug when I didn't immediately take it. "It's good to see you, sweetheart." The formality was strange after everything that had happened. We took our seats, Megan shooting me encouraging glances across the table as Mom served the lasagna. "We heard about Medinova," Dad said as we began eating. "Congratulations. It's an impressive achievement." "Thank you," I said simply. $8 million, Mom added, as if testing how the number sounded. Out loud. "And royalties too, I understand." I nodded, taking a bite of lasagna. It was good. Mom had always been an excellent cook when she chose to make the effort. "I spoke with Howard Bergman yesterday," Dad continued. "He thinks very highly of you. Says your documentation and attention to detail were instrumental in protecting your patent." I looked up, surprised. "You called Howard?" "I wanted to thank him," Dad said, meeting my eyes directly, "for protecting my daughter when I failed to." The simple admission caught me off guard. I set down my fork, waiting for what would come next. "Olivia?" Mom began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "What happened with Greg was inexcusable. We failed you. I failed you. As your mother, I should have been the first person defending you, and instead..." She trailed off, eyes glistening with tears. "Instead, you told me not to make trouble." I finished for her. "You told me to be grateful for 8% of my own work." Mom flinched but nodded. "Yes, and I was wrong. So very wrong." We've had some difficult conversations in this house over the past week, Dad said, glancing at Megan. Your sister has been quite vocal about our failings as parents. Megan shrugged unapologetically. Someone had to say it. She told us things we didn't want to hear, Mom admitted, about how we've treated you over the years. The dismissive comments, the lack of interest in your work, the way we favored Greg and his accomplishments. It wasn't always intentional, Dad added quickly. We didn't understand your work. The technical aspects were beyond us, and so we defaulted to what was familiar. Business success, traditional achievements. That's not an excuse, Mom interjected, surprising me. Just an explanation. We should have made more effort. We should have been proud of you for who you are, not for how well you fit into our expectations. I looked between them, trying to gauge their sincerity. There seemed to be genuine regret in their expressions, but years of disappointment had made me wary. Why now? I asked finally. Is it because I'm suddenly successful by conventional standards? Because the neural interface is worth millions? Would we be having this conversation if the patent dispute had gone differently? That's a fair question, Dad acknowledged. And the honest answer is, I don't know. I'd like to think we would have eventually recognized our mistake, but he sighed heavily. Money and success do have a way of clarifying things. Suddenly, everyone can see value that was always there. Greg told me about Aunt Catherine, I said, watching Dad's face carefully. About her chronic pain. Dad's expression tightened. Yes. My sister has suffered for 15 years with neuropathic pain from her accident. The medications help somewhat, but they leave her foggy, disconnected. You never mentioned it, I said. All those times I talked about my research, about neural pathways and pain management. You never once said, hey, that might help my sister. I didn't make the connection, Dad admitted. When you talked about neural interfaces and electrical stimulation, it sounded like science fiction to me. I didn't understand the practical applications. He shook his head ruefully. I didn't listen carefully enough to understand that my daughter was creating something that could help people like Catherine. When Dr. Cruz explained how your device worked, right there at Thanksgiving dinner, Mom added, I saw your father truly understand your work for the first time. And I realized how little effort we'd made to understand it ourselves. I called Catherine the next day, Dad said quietly. Told her about your invention, what it might mean for people with chronic pain, she cried, Olivia, said it was the first real hope she'd had in years. I felt a lump form in my throat despite my determination to remain detached. Medinova is prioritizing clinical trials. They're committed to making the interface accessible even to patients with limited insurance coverage. That's remarkable, Dad said, and I could see in his eyes that he meant it. You've created something that will help countless people. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. Megan reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Told you they were working on their apology game. Despite everything, I laughed. It's a start. Is that what this is? Mom asked carefully. A start? I considered the question, looking around the dining room where so many tense family meals had taken place over the years. The room where, just 2 weeks ago, my family had dismissed my work and defended Greg's theft. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. I appreciate the apology. I believe you mean it. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. We understand, Dad said, though the disappointment was clear in his voice. We're just grateful you were willing to come tonight, to listen. What about Greg? I asked. Where do things stand with him? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. We've had some difficult conversations with Greg as well, Mom said carefully. He's staying with friends in New York for now, looking for work outside. The finance industry. He's facing the consequences of his actions, Dad added, more firmly than I expected. As he should. What he did was wrong. Full stop. This surprised me. I had half expected them to be pushing for reconciliation, for forgiveness, for family harmony at any cost. He's still family, Mom continued, but that doesn't excuse his behavior. We've made that clear to him. Megan nodded. Very clear. Like I was there for one of the calls, and I've never heard Dad use those words before. Your aunt and uncle have been less understanding of our position, Dad admitted. They feel we're being too harsh on Greg, not supportive enough. Family dinner conversations have been super fun lately, Megan said sarcastically. Lots of meaningful silences and passive-aggressive comments about loyalty. The family is divided, Mom said simply, and that's painful. But sometimes standing for what's right means accepting division rather than forcing false harmony. I studied my mother, wondering when she had developed this clarity. Mom had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who insisted on maintaining appearances regardless of underlying realities. What changed for you? I asked her directly. Mom seemed surprised by the question. I've had a lot of time to think these past 2 weeks about the kind of mother I've been, the kind of person I've been. She glanced at Megan. Your sister has been brutally honest about how my focus on appearances and family harmony has often come at your expense. I wasn't actually that brutal, Megan interjected. Just pointed out some patterns. Patterns I didn't want to see, Mom acknowledged. It's hard to confront your own failings as a parent, to realize you've hurt your child while thinking you were acting in their best interest. The vulnerability in her voice was new. Mom had always presented a perfectly composed face to the world, had taught us to do the same. I can't promise I'll change overnight, she continued, but I'm trying to see more clearly, to listen more carefully, to value substance over appearance. That's all any of us can do, Dad said quietly. Try to be better today than we were yesterday. The rest of dinner passed in surprisingly genuine conversation. They asked thoughtful questions about the neural interface, about the metanova, contract, about my consulting role. I found myself explaining the technology in detail, drawing diagrams on napkins to illustrate concepts, the way I would with colleagues. And they listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time. After dessert, Dad excused himself briefly and returned carrying a small, worn notebook. I found this in the attic last week, he said, placing it in front of me. I thought you might want to have it. I opened the notebook carefully. Inside, in my childish handwriting, were detailed plans for a pain relief helmet I designed when I was 9 years old, complete with crayon illustrations and a materials list that included Christmas lights and my brother's remote control, car parts. You were always inventing things to help people, Dad said softly. Even then, I should have seen where that path was leading you. I traced the childish drawings with my finger, remembering the little girl who had believed she could fix people's pain with some tinfoil and determination. I'd forgotten about this. I'm sorry we didn't nurture that part of you more deliberately, Mom said, that we tried to push you toward more conventional paths. It's never too late to start, Megan said, and I caught the gentle warning in her voice, directed not at me, but at our parents. A reminder that tonight's conversation was just a beginning. As I drove home later that evening, the old notebook on the passenger seat beside me, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. The dinner had gone better than I'd expected. No arguments, no dismissals, genuine apologies, and what seemed like real introspection from both parents. Yet I remained cautious. One dinner couldn't erase decades of pattern, couldn't instantly rebuild trust that had been broken repeatedly. The path forward would require consistent effort, particularly from my parents. Still, something had shifted. In them, perhaps, but more importantly in me. I no longer needed their validation to know my worth, their approval or understanding. were welcome, but no longer necessary to my sense of self. Back at my apartment, I found an email from Medinova with the first proposed timeline for clinical trials. They wanted to begin within 2 months, an ambitious schedule that would require intensive work from all involved. As I reviewed the documents, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Ms. Bennett? This is Catherine Winters, your father's sister. I sat up straighter. Aunt Catherine? This is a surprise. For me as well, she said, her voice warm, but tired. I hope you don't mind that I asked Daniel for your number. After hearing about your neural interface, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about what it might mean for people like me. Dad mentioned your condition, I said carefully. I'm sorry you've been suffering. 15 years, she said matter-of-factly. Some days better than others, but never pain-free. The medications help, but the side effects... She trailed off. Your father explained how your device works. It sounds remarkable. The clinical trials will be starting soon, I told her. If you're interested, I could speak with the research team at Medinova about including you. I would be incredibly grateful, Catherine said, her voice thick, with emotion. But that's not the only reason I called. I wanted to tell you how proud I am of what you've accomplished, of how you've stood up for yourself. You know about that? Daniel told me everything, how Greg tried to take credit for your work, how the family initially sided with him. She sighed. Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me. The Bennett family has always had a blind spot when it comes to their golden boys. I was startled by her candor. You sound like you have some experience with that. More than I care to. Remember, Catherine said ruefully, the family narrative has always been that I'm the fragile one, the one who needs support and protection. In reality, I built a successful architectural firm before my accident, lived independently, made my own way, but that never quite fit with how they wanted to see me. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection with this aunt I'd only known peripherally. They have a way of simplifying people to fit their preferred narrative. Exactly. Which is why I was so impressed when Daniel told me how you'd fought back. It takes courage to challenge family mythology, especially when you're doing it alone. I wasn't entirely alone, I said, thinking of Julie, of Megan, of Howard and Derek. I had support. I'm glad, Catherine said warmly, and I want you to know that you have my support as well, for whatever that's worth. What you've created matters, and how you've defended it matters too. After we hung up, I sat holding my phone, strangely moved by the conversation. All these years, Aunt Catherine had been on the periphery of family gatherings, defined primarily by her pain and limitations. I'd never known about her architectural career, her independent spirit, her clear-eyed view of family dynamics. I wondered how many other connections I might have missed, how many potential allies I'd overlooked because I'd accepted the family's simplified narratives. The next morning, I woke to an email notification that made my heart race. The first installment of funds from Medinova had been transferred to my account. It was real. All of it. The patent, the contract, the money, the future stretching out. Before me with possibilities I was only beginning to comprehend. I made coffee and stood by my kitchen window, watching the neighborhood wake up. The same view I'd had for years, but now everything looked different. Not because I could afford to move, but because I was seeing with new eyes, the eyes of someone who had fought for what was hers and won. My phone chimed with a text from Dr. Cruz. Confirmed for meeting next Tuesday. Looking forward to discussing improvements to inventor protections. I smiled, typing back. As am I. I have some specific suggestions based on recent experience. A moment later, another text arrived, this one from Julie. Day 3 of neural interface relief. Still going strong. 0 medication needed. When can I expect my personal gold-plated version now that you're loaded? I laughed out loud. the sound echoing in my small kitchen. Working on it. Might need to be platinum, though. Gold is so pedestrian. Julie. That's my girl. Welcome to the dark side of having actual money. Setting down my phone, I turned to my laptop and opened a fresh document. For weeks, all my energy had been focused on defending what I'd already created. Now it was time to look forward, to consider what might come next. I began typing, ideas flowing freely, refinements to the neural interface, potential applications beyond pain management, new projects entirely. As my fingers flew across the keyboard, I felt a sense of expanding possibility, of horizons broadening in all directions. The neural interface had been just the beginning. There were other problems to solve, other innovations to develop, other ways to improve lives through technology. And now I had the resources, the validation, and most importantly, the confidence to pursue them. My phone rang. Megan. "Hey, are you sitting down?" she asked without preamble. "Yes. Why?" "Mom just called Aunt Rachel and told her to stop defending Greg unless she wants to lose her relationship with both her nieces." Megan's voice held a note of disbelief. I was in the room. It was epic. She actually said, "My daughters deserve better than what this family has given them, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I blinked, genuinely shocked. "Mom said that? To Aunt Rachel?" Word for word, I nearly fell off my chair. "Wow," I said, not knowing what else to add. "I know, right? Maybe people really can change." Megan paused. "Or at least try to." "Time will tell, I guess." "Time will tell," I agreed, thinking of the long road ahead. For my parents, for the neural interface, for all the possibilities now opening before me. Whatever happened next, I would face it as myself, whole and undiminished, no longer seeking external validation for my worth. The most valuable patent I'd secured wasn't for the neural interface at all, but for the ownership of my own life, my own choices, my own future. And that was worth more than $8 million could ever be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.